Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Very welcome to this pertinent discussion on winning in data abundance. Just to kick off and introduce the topic, we have all been hit by COVID last year, and a lot of businesses had to really adapt to a new way of working. And one of the benefits that has happened over the last 2 years, I would say, is the abundance of data that we have started to live in with. The more digital the world has become, the more footprint of data it is leaving behind us. So as a country, where from a GDP perspective, we may be not at the top, but from a data perspective, we are really getting to be a data-rich country. Today, we have more than 600 million smartphone users, 700 million internet users, and over the last year, the amount of time that people have spent on their devices has actually gone up by over 40%. This is one of the highest that we have seen globally. So data is not really sleeping. It is upon us as an industry to say how do we make the most of it, right? Because what we are living in with is the new oil. So when we say that data is the new oil, if we put the numbers behind it, the numbers speak for themselves. 10 years ago, the biggest companies in the world were oil companies. Today, if we look at it, 8 out of the top 10 players have used data and technology to build their businesses. These businesses have been hugely profitable. These businesses have generated shareholder value as well. So this is the true picture in terms of how data is becoming the new oil, as explained in numbers. Coming closer to our industry, we have had an explosion in the variety and the depth of data that is available to us. Looking a couple of years back, what bankers would use is essentially a bureau data which was still maturing, a set of their own bank statements, and a lot of judgment when it came to underwriting their customers, when it came to thinking about what else can we sell to them. But today, we have a lot more information, both from the digital infrastructure that has been set in the country, but also from the mobile devices that exist today in pockets of every person, right? So think about a customer who does not have a bureau score, but today through his mobile data scrape that this person pays his utility bills on time. You know what kind of a device that he's using. You know where he's shopping. Can you use all this information to take better decisions on this customer? So this is the deluge of data which is coming, and the use cases are not just restricted to primarily credit, but across the customer life cycle in terms of really hyper personalizing the experience and the value that we can add to the customer's life, and also the value that we can add to the financial institution. So right from how do we interact with clients, how do we price our products, how do we cross-sell, how do we make the needs met, but also towards how do we collect money from our customers, right? So it's right through the cycle. As we get more data, I think we are also looking at a moment which is the UPI moment in the lending side of the industry. With account aggregator and OKIN coming together, it is a democratization of data that's going to happen. We will have information about the potential borrowers, potential potential investors to be available at the click of a button and at the consent of the customer. And the open enabled networks can really create offers for those customers from different lenders, promoting real-time competition. And this is not a concept anymore. The ecosystem is coming live. Account aggregators are getting active. Banks have launched use cases. So this is becoming a reality as we speak. And fast forward 5 years, the potential on this is huge. Having said that, it also puts in a lot of responsibility on us. Data privacy is an important theme. It is putting the ownership of data and the permission to use the data in hands of the customers themselves, and hence banks and other FIs need to be prepared to modify their systems and processes accordingly to allow the customers to have control of their data. As we look at data-driven transformations, this is every organization is attempting this, but we often hear a lot of challenges as we look at transformation of organizations. Transforming digitally with data at the core is hard. And there are many set of challenges, whether it is the legacy infrastructure that we have, it is the current set of processes, it is the product-oriented view, it is the inability to use the data in a particular manner. All of these lead to a significant challenge when it comes to transforming based on data. And this is one of the themes that we will discuss a lot today. And the key to that is putting data at the center of the strategy of organizations, and not just think of it as something on the side which can be used as an enabler. It is the core to the strategy. It will drive a lot of outcomes going forward. And to believe that it just gets solved by having algorithms in place is not the solution. You need to strengthen the technology platforms. You need to use the latest technology. You need to enable on the upcoming regulations around it. But more importantly, you need to change the way in which organizations fundamentally operate and how data gets embedded in the core of how we are set up as an organization and how do we work together within the organizations, right? And last but not the least, this will not happen if the industry is not able to attract the right set of talent. And tech talent is getting scarce across the industry. But as financial services industry, as we were discussing in the last panel, as financial services industry, would we be seen as a legacy industry which will find it very difficult to attract talent? Or we want to be at the front end of it and make sure that we are seen as organizations which are both cutting edge in terms of work, but also in terms of ways of working that is able to attract this kind of talent. So that's a short introduction, to the topic. And with this, let me just introduce our esteemed set of panelists here. We have Mr. Rajagopal, Mr. P R Rajagopal from Bank of India.
Good morning. Hello. Good afternoon, to be precise.
We have Mr. Rajesh Kumar, the CEO of TransUnion CIBIL in India. We have Mr. V R Govindarajan, who is founder and director at Perfios. And we have Mr. Bhavesh Gupta, who is the CEO of the lending business at Paytm. It's a pleasure to be with all of you today on this discussion. And let me tee off the discussion with you, Rajesh. You have been at the backbone of building financial data in the industry as TransUnion CIBIL. How have you seen the evolution of data, over the last couple of years? How have you seen this explosion, and what are the opportunities that you have seen beyond the core of credit risk management? Rajesh, I'm not able to hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thank you, Mayank, and hello to the fellow panelists. I wish we were all sitting together as it used to be a couple of years ago, but good to be here, and thanks for inviting me. So straight away getting on with Mayank's question, I think I will stick to the specific in this question, which is the first part. And the second part, perhaps, there will be some coverage subsequently. So the specifics in the first part will be, sorry? No, thinking I was on mute. So the specifics from the first part, when we speak about demand and supply of data, how have we seen it evolving? I think this is a very important question in itself. We probably don't talk enough about what's happening on the supply side and demand side of data. We're only talking about data explosion, etc., all the time. So I'm going to break this into three tenets, so to say, three parts or three pillars. First is we the consumers. We all have to remember that it's really the consumers who generate data in the first place. Institutions, organizations don't generate data. It's the consumers. When they transact, they are generating a data, like even a bank statement, right? When I initiate a debit or a credit that gets authorized by the bank, there is a new transaction in the bank account. So first is the consumers who generate data. So we're talking about supply and demand. So when we talk about consumers generating data, supply is only going to increase by the day. It's been increasing. That's why you say data is a new line. And what makes this supply increase is obviously going to be factors that affect consumer experience. If you make my decision making as a consumer easy, I want to get onto that app and conduct my transaction, right? So customer experience, convenience, etc., we know all the rest. I'm trying to save time on the well-known. So since Bhavesh is here, let me take a Paytm example. When I order food on Swiggy, I always use Paytm. It's all nicely embedded and most convenient. If I have to transfer money to my good friend Mayank, I'm going to do it on Google Pay. Somehow that P2P transfer with just that one OTP is very simple for me. So I am selecting these based on my perceptions of convenience, ease of operation, blah, 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 all those points. So me as a customer generating data first. Let's move on quickly. Then there are these great big institutions and organizations who manage their data, don't really own the data. These are the technicalities that regulations around the world are talking about. I believe a lot of data there is really waiting for value to be unlocked. When you also said in the second part of your question, Mayank, how do you see this evolving as we go into the future? I really believe that the data sitting with large organizations is the one that really needs to be unlocked. Not companies like CIBIL. We are a credit information company and we are mandated anyway to share this information with the public. But there's a lot of data in large institutions that really haven't seen any unlocking of the value of the data. Those organizations want to see that information or data as what they want to do with it or what they can do with it, but a far cry from really coming together. And it's all too fragmented anyway. Then we are talking about the third important piece, which is the enabling regulation, enabling ecosystem, etc. And we have Govind here, he's going to, I'm sure, touch upon this as well. Things like your account aggregator system and then the right data protection bill, right? Now, I think this third component here is going to play a very critical role in unlocking the value in the second component, which is the institutions and different types of data coming together, which if it does well, all the rest we know very well. We are not going to spend too much time talking about those things. We know how to create the microservices architecture, to process data at flow, ingest it real time online, run our beautiful algos throughout prescriptive, predictive. We know all that, but if we don't bring different types of data together and create the right value, I'll end again with the first tenet, which are us as the customers. Give me beautiful products and services, I'm going to use more and more. Now see this self-feeding cycle between the three. I believe the second one is kind of stuck, it's not releasing enough. Lastly, to conclude my time on this question, I think this A, B and C, how they come together is really going to be the deciding factor about the evolution. Otherwise, like you said rightly, Mike, 99.5% of the data is not used or analyzed by anybody. That's going to be a monstrous waste. How much of that goes waste or is useful will depend on how these three come together and how the third factor plays an enabling role. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Rajesh. And maybe I'll pick up the second thread that you had mentioned. With regards to institutions and them sitting on a lot of data already. Question to you, Mr. Rajagopal. The fact that banks have a lot of data sitting with them over years is known for ages, right? What have been the practical challenges in being able to make the most of that data. Banks have taken some steps in being able to use the data that they have, but still largely a lot of decisions get taken manually. Systems don't talk to each other. What does it take, and what are some of the practical challenges that you have seen in making the use of data that exists with you today?
See, thank you, Mayank. I'll just supplement. The answer to this question is basically a supplement to what Rajesh has already flagged in terms of institutions owning data and having huge amounts of data, humongous data. The problem with the data is, one of the important things that Rajesh has flagged is absence of unified database. You call it integration or you call it unification, whatever you want to call in terms of this one. It's completely segregated. We don't know what data, where it is remaining. For example, many of the banks have attempted to actually put in place MDM. Okay, many of the banks have attempted to look at typically data warehousing models in terms of trying to manage and integrate data and build use cases around data. But however, they have not been very successful, and the practical issues that actually are bottlenecks around utilizing this data are actually unlocking this data, if I may use the word Rajesh as for this one. Is basically there are a lot of problems in terms of our tech talent within the organizations. See, these technologies, if you talk in terms of the technologies, the data technologies that we have today, they are all evolving technologies. They are not actually mature technologies where universally people understand these technologies and implement it seamlessly in the organizations. Many of them are evolving technologies. We really don't know. I still continue to actually confront within my tech department whether I should go for an open source system or I should actually continue to actually depend on vendor for the purpose of actually unifying data and integrate data and develop use cases in data. There are a lot of unresolved questions with respect to this unlocking of data that we have today. Apart from that, legacy systems that you have, now you don't have really, platforms that actually, there are some tools available like Kevo and all who say there is no need for coding. You can actually plug and play types of platforms you can provide so that any type of data, any type of data structure, a data set can be integrated efficiently. These some things that are being touted in the market, and they are not successfully tested. They are not time tested technologies today. So we continue to have a typically coder based dependence. Coder dependence on many of these unification issues. Again, I am not able to really engage with them at different levels, and we have serious issues of resources in unlocking this data. So only thing is, like organization like Perfios and typically even Paytm, I know that they have actually developed their own data analytics platform and all within the organization. They have invested huge amounts of money. Now, my problem is, should I invest now or should I actually wait for the data technologies to evolve so that I can simply plug and play over a period of time? And what is the imperative? Is it imperative of today? Is it imperative of tomorrow? All these discussions continue to happen in the bank. So maybe solutions will going forward will emerge. We'll see how fintechs like typical payment system operators play out and use the technologies. We will adapt better and then co-opt them in terms of unlocking the data that we have. That's what I see going forward.
Okay, and that's Mr. Rajagopal, that's a very interesting thought that you have brought in terms of and Rajesh was also alluding to it, that there are institutions which are sitting with a lot of data, but then there are third party players who excel in being able to just read that information and make sense of that data much better than the tech talent and the teams of banks can do. So you see the evolution of a lot of fintechs in being able to drive different sort of data usages within the bank, or as a bank, are you thinking of building some of these capabilities internally Because this could be a competitive advantage for you as a bank, but right now it is being restricted by the ability of being able to drive that competitive advantage.
See, what happens is, the problem is, how do I prioritize? See, the problem with this is, today we are basically collectors of data. To be precise, to add to what Rajesh says, we continue to be collectors of data, and
So
there is
you are the oil and Perfios is the refinery in some sense.
So what has happened is, what has happened over a period of time, we continue to be collectors of data, and there is a very, very limited analysis insofar as, business intelligence we have no doubt over a period of time we have developed, and therefore we do have business intelligence. Now, if you really want to graduate to predictive decision making or prescriptive decision making, you need a different type of setup, and graduating to that level is very, very difficult considering the infrastructure constraints we have today. So basically it is like this, it's going to be hybrid model insofar as data driven decision making and creating a data culture within the bank also. See, what happens is culture can be created only when your organizations are open. You cannot internally develop a culture. Actually, the intermingling has to happen. So naturally, the third-party data developers, people who provide insights of data instead of information. Today, what is happening is the data I have is only information for me to some extent, because I have very rudimentary tools of business intelligence and the data analysis tools. So I only get information. I don't get really insights into data. So if you really want an insight, the new way of looking at the data, new way of looking at, analyzing the data has to that wind has to blow into this organization. So that wind can blow into the organization only when you have really opened the doors and invite people like Perfios, people like Paytms of the world to come and join us and tell us how do we do our thing better. Then two things will happen. One is basically the data unlocking will happen from a very technical perspective. Another thing is there will be a cultural shift that can happen in the organizations. You cannot bring a cultural shift by closing your doors. You have to open your doors, then only cultural shift can happen. So data driven decision making as a culture can come only when you co-opt a lot of people. So I firmly believe it is going to be a hybrid model. I may develop, because there will be actually flow of resources from the banks and the organization, fintech organizations. Ultimately, what happens is the P&L. So P&L, my P&L I have to protect, they have to protect their P&L. So therefore, we have to cooperate, and there will be co-opetition than competition. So competitive advantage and all is something that I don't really believe in that. In a very, very disruptive technologies that are being kind of floated in the market today. So these disruptive technologies actually one day it will destroy my competitive advantage. So it is not possible for me to have competitive advantage going forward. So that's where I feel that it's actually a hybrid model. Both have to exist, and in fact, it is they who will actually drive data culture in many of the data intensive organizations.
Got it. That's a very humble submission. But from the deluge of data that you have seen, beyond credit and lending, I think those use cases are very clear and known of what the potential that the data offers. What are the top, other top 2-3 use cases that you see based on data where the industry should put a big bet on?
Basically, if you ask me, the one part, we are only referring today to one part of the balance sheet. See, we are not actually holistically looking at the entire 360 degree on the balance sheet of the banks. See, what has happened was most of the digitization happened on the liability side over a period of 10 to 15 years. We try to actually provide mobile banking system, mobile banking, we try to provide internet banking. You have payment system operators coming and giving you, making payments easy, UPI coming in. If you see, most of it has happened in terms of transactions, and most of it has happened on the liability side of the balance sheet. And now the technologies that you see developing today are very nascent, and they are actually maturing in terms of on the asset side of the balance sheet. So over a period of time, what happens is, I strongly feel that there will be a 360 degree offering to the customers. In your own slide, you have put up that hyper personalization is something that is going to happen. in financial services. So I am not going to be a player, who will sit and then wait for the customers to come in. I have to actually tie up with so many people, become a marketplace, be a part of the marketplace. Today, see, financial services industry is not part of the marketplace in terms of in the consumer journey. So from a customer journey to consumer journey, so that's how the whole cycle happens. So if I'm looking at consumer journeys, not customer journeys, naturally, so that there are many use cases from the point of view of consumer journeys that you can build in terms of the data I have, in terms of the data that credit bureaus can provide, in terms of the data that typically different types of data organizations provide, including social media platforms. Because see, today I only look at the transaction. What do I have as a bank? I have only transaction data of the customer. So I don't really have the other data. Typically, demographic data I do have to some extent, but demographic data resides elsewhere because I have access to Aadhaar, and also there I have to actually depend on Aadhaar for my demographic data. Apart from that, the customer digital footprint is not something that I really have because I am not very digitally active. So digital footprint of the customer is residing elsewhere with other data managers. So we'll have to have a type going forward. So from the banks have to graduate from customer-driven models to consumer-driven models. So when you talk in terms of consumer-driven models, there are many products, there are many innovations that you can do. Once you actually have changed the very idea of being a bank customer for financial services to consumer of products, financial services being one of the value adds in the entire product chain. So that's what my view is.
You've touched upon a very important theme on the consumer footprint and lying elsewhere, and we'll touch it in a bit. But right now, let me just shift gears to Govind. Govind, this question is regarding account aggregators, and we see this as a very important differentiator and disruptor in the industry going forward. But many participants are also wary, especially the large banks, those who are sitting with a lot of data. They are wary to say that we will end up being net givers in this, because the data will be used by other players to make decisions and probably take away our business. Now, how do you see this situation, and how do you see the market evolving on these lines, and how do you allay some of these thoughts that are there?
This is a great question. Mayank, you referred to in your slide about this digital transformation, how many attempts have been tried and watered and all that. And one of the primary reasons for all of that is till AA evolved, or till AA was introduced, there has been no framework available for people to provide data in a digital form, even if they wanted to. So as a result, there are two issues. One, the institutions were not able to get reliable data that can drive their digital transformation. And two, for the citizens, there was no guarantee that the data that is being obtained is not going to be misused. And AA basically plugs in both those problems, right? Because it gives a way for institutions to obtain data digitally in a reliable form, in an authenticated fashion, because it is coming directly from the source. And the citizens can be reassured that because they have given a consent for the purpose for which it is be used and all that, they know that it's not going to be misused. Now, as a result, AA is going to be the biggest driver of digital transformation. And during COVID, what has happened is all businesses, not just financial institutions, everyone has realized digital transformation is required not only for growth, even for survivability it is required. Without it, you cannot survive. That's what happened during wave 1 and wave 2. We found that the impact was not so much on businesses, largely because a lot of them have put together various digital transformation initiatives by that time. So this is what AA is going to accomplish. Now, every financial institution, obviously we work with so many banks, and we have heard these concerns. The initial days of AA, saying if I enable and I become a financial information provider on the AA ecosystem, will I lose customers? Right? Now, most of them have realized, almost all of them I would say, have realized that AA is going to throw up so many new use cases. Right? For example, Mr. Rajagopal was talking about customer to consumer thing. Like, stretching it a bit, I would say the whole embedded finance, banking as a service. So all of these things, if you see, AA is going to be a great enabler for that. For example, we have some products that we are rolling out, which will ensure that you have the whole anchoring, like whether it is your e-commerce data or Swiggy data, Zomato data, whatever the marketplace related data, in addition to the financial data, and driving various kinds of innovation on top of that. Because again, as Mr. Rajagopal mentioned, banks have the banking financial data. Now, these kind of data on top of all of that is going to give that complete behavior. We can build a persona, whether it's a digital persona, whether they are cash-rich persona, all that stuff, right? So now what AI is doing is enabling all these different kinds of data. I'm not saying today AI can get this data, but that is the framework on which all of these are being built today. And banks also have realized that they will miss the boat if they are not going to embrace this. So all this initial apprehension about am I going to lose customers is now giving way to, if I embrace this, I'm going to get a lot more large set of, as Mr. Rajagopal said, the consumers that are going to be signing up through these marketplaces that will come and become new to bank customers. So I think we have crossed that stage of the initial apprehension.
And Bhavesh, I would like to fill in, on this point and something related. Yes, data with AA will start getting more democratized. Any player who is a part of the network asks for it, gets it. With the customer consent. So all FIs then start having the right to the same data. What will really differentiate different financial institutions then, when data starts getting more and more commoditized? What do you see as real differentiators? How do you think about that?
Yeah, thanks, man. Good afternoon, everyone. So I have a very different take to data and everything which is happening around it. So let me put this in a bit of a context. See, data is even available today. It's just that the plumbing of the data is very much better. Right? Just like remittances was always available, what NPCI, UPI Railroad did is it did a very great plumbing and it became convenient for people to move money, and hence bank kind of lost it, and the entire P2P remittances business moved to so-called PSPs. AA is going to do the same thing, wherein the plumbing will become so fantastic that the person who wants his or her data to be consumed by somebody else, the seamlessness is going to be very, very good. But the underlying issue continues to be, what are financial institutions doing to use the data, and do they have the capability to use and consume the data in giving credit basis that data, right? And if they do not have the capability, plumbing will only solve convenience. So what could happen is, from balance sheet of one large lender, it could move to another lender. But the incremental credit may not happen, right? Because if today I am a customer of an X institution and I have a bank account and have data, and that my X institution has not been able to give me credit, through AA infrastructure, I can apply to another institution to get credit and get my information moved from that institution to other institution. Now, the other institution has to have capability to consume that information and be able to give credit. I think the fundamental problem is there is yet not enough statistical confidence in large financial institutions to use banking information or alternate data, as Govi mentioned about data available on social media platforms, etc., as a surrogate to income estimation. And till that capability is built, the data will only remain just data, and it will become optically nice to say I'm on AA, but it will not add any incremental value. So what needs to be done? Right? The way I see this piece here is, there is an amount of risk capital every institution needs to earmark to be able to leverage database underwriting or database decision making, which allows them to take some risk, albeit in a calibrated manner, to build these models. The difference between fintechs and non-fintechs, right, is only that the fintechs, you can talk about fintechs that they had easy money, cheap money, whatever. Globally and domestically, they've been able to demonstrate that they have the ability to put some risk capital in using the data, which is alternative data, to create models which allows them to hopefully give credit or help customer get credit or any other decisions. So it is a leap of faith, both commercially for institutions and culturally for institutions. And unless that is made, I don't think the imagination AA is going to solve something magical will happen. Is going to happen. And the clear answer to that question is that products and technology was available to financial institutions first. Then it came to fintechs, be it wallets, be it the entire UPI railroad, but they could not leverage it, and then fintechs leveraged it. Right? In this case also, it could eventually end up being the same. So it is in some way a kind of a warning shot for legacy institutions to say, okay, what do I do now? And Mr. Rajagopal said it correctly, that the choice has to be made now. Otherwise, it will be a long time forward, and it may not be helpful for the institutions today.
Bhavesh, Mayank, if I can just step in here.
Yeah.
Sure, Govind.
Bhavesh, it's absolutely right what you made, because AA is at the end of it a plumbing that enables the democratization of access to the data instead of using proprietary ways. But what you do with that raw data and then derive insights out of it is left to the financial institutions. So unless that data is being worked upon, AA by itself can at best make the access to the data easier rather than using proprietary stuff. But the insights and all that still have to be driven by the financial institutions, so that they make full use of it. So AA is definitely not a panacea. AA just makes the access to the data easier. The insights have to be still driven by the financial institutions.
Yeah, and Bhavesh, I would just say,
I'll just supplement what Bhavesh said in a very differently. I would like to supplement what Bhavesh has said. See, what happens is, one thing that we underestimate is the support that the regulator is giving to this initiative. One, two, what happens with typically account aggregators is they are not going to simply actually facilitate data transfer from one place to another place. And of course, as rightly pointed out by Govindarajan, the customer cannibalization is not going to happen because simply there is a AA or something. So it is not going to happen. It's going to be really value accretive going forward. There is no doubt about it. But I am looking at it from a different perspective, saying that what happens is it will actually accelerate the data consumption, and it will force the financial institutions actually to gain insights and move towards typically comprehensive data models and use cases in asset creation. See, today what is happening, as he rightly pointed out, is very, very correct in saying that there is still apprehension on the part of the financial institution. There is no resistance today. I can tell you, because having been here for so many years, there is no resistance to change. But still there is no pushback today. There is no resistance to change today. But still people are gingerly about the change. That is the only issue. So it is something like, you'll have to actually catch them and then bring them up. So naturally there will be a lot of collaboration that will happen across the organization with respect to data use cases. See, ultimately what happens is, what I see from the point of view of account aggregators is, every organization will develop into a niche organization in terms of actually serving the consumers. So I may be good in serving a particular type of consumer, so I'll try to do a niche business. So today you have institutions which are very large, doing everything across the world, have all product based type of business models. The entire revenue models are based on product. The moment you talk about hyper personalization, I have to have a shift to niche business models. So naturally my balance sheets will be different, my business model will be different, my revenue models will be different. That will get accelerated through AA. That's what I am saying. So what I'm basically looking at is AA will help accelerate me to understand my business, shed all the useless businesses I have today, and become a niche business, and then give very niche services to the consumer. We talk banking as a service, and then innovate on those services continuously over a period of time, so that I continue to have a niche consumer within me. So then cannibalization cannot happen. Today what is happening is, see, you are talking about commoditization of data. Today customer is commoditized. Okay, so customer will become very niche and data will get commoditized. That is what is going to happen. That's what my take is.
These are very interesting and different takes to the same problem. Audiences, if you have any question, you can post it on the chat window. Bhavesh, you made a very profound point. How thinking about earmarking risk capital to in some sense get more confidence and trust on the data, which is right now thinly populated or thinly understood by different organizations. I think it's a very profound point. How do you look at the third party data that is available? That is also maturing. When will it start becoming mainstream? Which are the third party data that you would really bet upon?
So the way I see is there are 4 kinds of data which is available today. There is data available in banks which can be accessed through AA pipes and otherwise. There is second data available, what is called the public registry data, which is fundamentally your Aadhaar, PAN and other demographic data which is available publicly. The third piece is what is called the customer consent data, wherein I as a customer consent to pass on my information to you. Right. And the fourth piece is what is called the proprietary data that the platforms may have. People like Paytm or any other platform will have. Now, the way one has to see this piece here is that people who can, and I'm giving you a credit answer, and we can take a non-credit answer also. People who need credit generally do not have all these 4 data in single pipe. People who don't need credit, when I say don't need credit, means people who can get credit easily, which is the top 10% of the country. It doesn't matter you have AA or whatever. The RM will come and get you a mortgage loan. But a very large population of this country is not in that sweet spot, wherein somebody will walk in and say, I want to offer you credit, especially small businesses, new to credit borrowers, etc., etc. So all of this data question that is being spoken about is for that consumer or small business. Now let's step back. Why aren't most companies unable to use this data? Whatever is available, what will be more available is a different issue. Whatever is available. The fundamental belief here is that the way even the companies consume this data, the way the data is architected structurally in the company, is not very robust and uniform. So when you say, and I have this favorite line to tell people, do you quote cat as a cat and a dog as a dog? Or do you quote everybody as an animal? If you quote everybody in plumbing as an animal, then your decision will be very different. But a cat is different, a dog is different. Your decision will be very different. So who's making that effort? That every data coming into the company, be it a data coming in from customer consent or public registry or AA or social media platform, is being labeled. If it's labeled correctly, your models can work. The core problem here is that companies have not invested enough in labeling data because it is a massive exercise. Once you label data correctly, then comes the risk capital, and then it comes the entire consumption of the data to build models. Everybody seems to be talking on the top that data will come, but data has nothing if you are not labeling it. So it does not matter that this data is a banking data or the social media data. Do we even have the infrastructure to label the data? I think that fundamental problem is a more infrastructure and cultural problem. And even largest companies in India haven't been able to solve it completely. Whosoever will solve that problem, in my opinion, will be winning this game of data-led decisioning versus people who have access to data, right? Access will get democratized. Over a period of time, customer consent-based architecture will come in. Customers will be very happy in sharing their information. But the people who can consume that information in the most appropriate manner, infrastructurally, will be able to do much more justice in giving n is equal to 1 decisions to Mr. Rajagopal's point of customer becoming consumer. Otherwise, this will remain utopian as it is even today. Right? And I can give you a practical example that a lot of people that we work with, we worked in the past, they take data, but they're always looking at 10% of the data, and 90% they don't understand. And they want to decide on that 10%, whereas they take 100% data. So it is nice to take 100%, but they don't know what to do with the 90%. So they have no infrastructure to consume the 90%. So the data is generally lying as one bunch of data in one table. It is not tabulated in a manner that can be consumed, right? And that's a sad part. And I'm not sure if work is happening in that area in most of the companies.
Got it. And let's talk about the customer consent part. It came in conversation a couple of times. Rajesh, the question is to you. How do we see the industry growing in the customer consent environment? There's also a question from the audience, from Shrikant Agarwal, on how can these privacy issues of sharing data be handled? We already have the data protection bill which is coming in, but how do you see that evolution going forward?
I don't know how much time we have left, Mayank, so I'm going to be pretty quick in answering this question. I think both the pieces, consumer consented data and from the protection bill, etc. I think to keep it very simple, the underlying theme is that as we go into the future, all that we've discussed last 45 minutes, obviously the sheer number and percentage of decisions and all the panelists say, if we get all that right, the sheer number and percentage of decisions that we, the consumers, take is going to be much higher than even what it is today. They're all going to be digital transactions. Now let's go to the next step. For digital transactions, for any digital transaction to be consummated or consumed, there are two things that will happen. One is the establishment of the identity. I am transferring money to Govind, then first of all, between the two devices, two organizations, everywhere first the identity has to be established, right? Then no matter what exchange of service or money, there is an authentication, authorization or approval of that transaction. Now this is just a simple exchange of the relevant information. So from a data protection bill, as long as the ecosystem and the regulation allows and takes care of my privacy concerns as a consumer, I am going to allow as much of this sharing of information that authorizes and authenticates the digital transactions, because as a consumer, I am yet to get the real benefit of all the data I generate. And lastly, again, in the interest of time, the way I look at it, all the data that I generate as a consumer, since we're talking about consumer consented data here, all the data that I generate as a consumer, I look at it as my balance sheet or my bank statement. It's an asset, like my savings, like my real estate, my equity. The data I generate is also an asset. After my college marks card and a CIBIL report or a CIBIL score, grown-ups, we don't even have anything apart from our visiting cards. And what do we have to show for ourselves to say, hey, I deserve better? Every human being would like to think he deserves better. And then if you really look at it, most of the times we as individuals, if we didn't get the best deal, be it product, price, distribution, or whatever service we call it, if we didn't get the best, my own personal hypothesis is that whenever I didn't get the best, it's because I suffered information asymmetry. I didn't even know where to look for the best and get it with convenience. So to bring all this to summation, in my mind, customer consented data with the right protection bill can only mean hundreds of more use cases, which is just going to explode from here on. I really look forward to all of us working together and working well to create that in a hurry. I think it's time. Thanks.
And my last question, thank you, Rajesh, for these thoughts. And my last question is on the topic of talent that many of you covered, both the talent and the culture part. I think Bhavesh spoke about culture very clearly on how culture needs to be developed. But how can the financial services industry attract and retain top talent? And I would we'd like to invite, some of the more fintech oriented players like Paytm and Perfios to talk about this. What are you guys doing to attract and retain talent in this hyper competitive environment?
See,
I'll go with it first.
Sure. It's a relatively easier question for me or Bhavesh compared to Mr. Rajagopal or TransUnion. The reason I'm saying it's easier is, as Mr. Rajagopal alluded to, there is a culture, there is a kind of a set pattern in a bank. It will be very difficult for them to change. That too, being a public sector bank, however hard they try, right? Whereas we don't have that kind of a legacy. So just to quickly answer this, there are two reasons why people stay with a company like Perfios. One is the professional pride, saying that we are innovating new products, we attempt to change the way financial services are delivered in this country. And if I can go and say that I was part of the team, I was the architect for doing that kind of a change, that's a huge professional pride that cannot be bought by anything else. So that is one clear reason why people want to stick to an innovation-led product company. Second thing is, there is this question, all this professional pride is fine, what is in it for me monetarily? Is there anything that is there? And we have, I think, in the country, the best ESOP policy that's there. That's huge, and it has been demonstrated also. So as and when we grow, the individuals also grow with us, and there is a significant liquidity available for them with every single round that we do. So as a result, what happens is there is a significant wealth creation that happens. It's not just some bonuses and incentives, it's a significant wealth creation. So a combination of professional pride in doing something relatively new and trend setting, plus a significant wealth creation aspect, together I think kind of helps a smaller company like us.
So, well, the way I see this piece is that there are three kinds of data folks in the industry today. There are data engineers, data modelers, and data analysts. All are data. Now, the mistake that most companies have been doing, and we are consciously not doing that, is to hire a data analyst as a modeler or hire a modeler as an engineer. So first and foremost, the companies have to be very clear what is the role of so-called data in a company. The engineering job is very different than modeling, right? And most people get disillusioned when they join the company, when they're joining as a modeler and they are put into engineering or vice versa, right? So having a very clear-cut understanding of a job description and then hiring makes it easier for right job for the right person. And if you can do that piece, I think there is a reasonable amount of stability for people and the growth trajectory. The engineering guy is people who are data coders. They are the plumbers of data, the labelers of data, and creating the infrastructure of managing data. And data modelers are the geeks out there who are mathematicians who are modeling, but the data analysts are neither the modeler nor the engineer. They're the people who are using the data lake to write SQLs and start to build Hadoops and everything else on top of it and saying, yeah, this is an MIS in the code old space. The second thing is your company demonstrating that we will always be taking data-led decisions and we will not take manual decisions, right? And I think the people who join organizations where they can see that very early and quickly, so they have a perception from outside. When they join inside, they first check, is this happening for real or this is not happening for real? And if they understand that this is happening for real, then they know that they can truly do cutting edge work, right? And the cutting edge work doesn't mean that they can they can do on AI and machine learning. I think that is overstated. I haven't come across a company which really does cutting edge work on machine learning and AI yet, right? Well, everybody talks about it, but they can do cutting edge work. And the third thing, and a very important thing here is the data infrastructure built by themselves, the company, or is bought? If you're building the data infrastructure, that is a very different capability for the talent retention versus buying. Because what ends up happening in buying, most data fellows become program managers, and they don't like becoming program managers. If you're building, then they have skin in the game. They know they're building something for tomorrow. They know that they are building something which is going to be very different. And I'll give you a very simple example. Are you building a bot, which is AI bot yourself, or are you buying it from somebody? Yeah, you can buy it from somebody and say, we have a bot. And a program manager from data science manages it. Now, building a bot is a 2-year job because the bot will have to be built technologically, yes, but it has to learn. And the learning part means your data models at the back have to be trained and they have to be trained to a level that they can demonstrate the outcome that we want, and it's an ever-growing information. Now, what we have realized that the jobs outside of India on data and data-led is so lucrative that if you do not provide of everything that Gopi has said, to me that is hygiene now, giving them best compensation, ESOP, etc. If you do not provide these are the things, you will lose talent, right? And that's the reason Paytm has the labs in Canada. So we have our own innovation center for data as a Paytm lab in Canada. Only to make sure that the cutting edge work on data that we would like to do is happening in so-called Paytm labs. So the best of the folks can be moved into labs, or best of the folks globally can be hired in Canada to do cutting edge work of data. And that's the reason we've been able to retain and hire talent so far, but not still doing a great job that we would like to do. And still the market demand is much higher.
Thank you. Thanks for your thoughts, Govi and Bhavesh. We'll bring the panel to a close, but just before we close, maybe a 15-second, literally, 10-word kind of an answer from you. What will it take? We all know the opportunity part of winning with data, but what will it take to win? What is the single most important thing for you? On which. Who are the players who will win? What do they need to do?
Can I?
Yes.
Yeah, I think 10-second answer is the players who really understand how to solve customers' tiny little problems every single day. All the rest is our problem. All that we speak.
My answer, Mayank, would be institutions who believe that the cognitive load of decision making has to be removed from customers and moved to machines. Those people will win.
So organizations that leverage this huge amount of data and derive insights rather than treat it as commodity data, those are the ones who will move forward.
Yes, Mr. Rajagopal. Say you're on mute.
Even though I am speaking last, it is not my last word. See, what I see is basically, from a human angle, because the organizations in India, so my perspective is mostly from India, domestic perspective. So basically the adaptability of an organization to the enormous changes that are happening is something that will actually make them win. So how nimble I can become, that will determine the winner. That's what.
So thank you for these wonderful thoughts. I'd like to thank all the panelists. I personally learned a lot from the discussion, and hoping that the industry will move forward in this direction and really take the pain out from the customers, leverage all the insights, take the cognitive load away from the customers, but also thinking about the real talent and adaptability that the organizations need to win in data. Thank you very much. See you all.